So just before a few weeks ago, I was probably just like you. In the current landscape of gaming and the nonsense we see today, I thought Gears of War was one of the last bastions of real, raw, testosterone-fueled gaming. A series that stood strong against the tide of wokeness, where men were men, women were background noise, and nobody ever cried about anything. And for a while, I believed that narrative. Oh yeah, Gears of War was never woke. It was all about big dudes with chainsaws and nothing else. But then I did something dangerous. I actually played the games. I read the books. And that's when I realized Gears of War has been a wolf in sheep's clothing this entire time. Because this wasn't just a case of the games got woke over time. No, Gears of War was never what we thought it was. It was always a Trojan horse, a carefully crafted deception designed to trick us into thinking we were safe, when in reality the corruption was there from the very beginning. Now don't get me wrong, Gears of War 2006 is still a pure, unfiltered, real gaming. Marcus Phoenix, absolute legend. Stoic, no nonsense, and doesn't waste time on feelings. The guy spent 4 years in prison and didn't even complain about it. That's a man. The game is simple. Big dudes, big guns, big action. It doesn't hold your hand, and it sure as hell doesn't pause for emotional monologues about feelings. You fight, you kill, you move on. No distractions, no progressive nonsense. I was feeling good. I thought I'd found the game that stood tall against the DEI mob. And then, I played the sequels. It starts subtly. You wouldn't notice it at first. You're still chainsawing locusts, you're still blowing stuff up. But then it happens. Dom Santiago fucking crying. I couldn't believe it. The game makes you watch this big, tough soldier break down in tears. Why? Because his wife died. Are you serious? The old Dom, Gears 1 Dom, would have just given a stoic nod and kept fighting. But no, now we have to have feelings shoved down our throats. And then I started noticing something else. The women. At first I thought, okay, they're just support characters. Whatever. But the more I played, the more I realized something disturbing. The women in Gears of War are never just background. They're always smarter, stronger, and somehow better than the men. Anya Stroud, oh, she's not just a love interest. No, she's running the mission, giving the orders, basically treating Marcus like a dumb brute. Bernie Mataki, oh, you thought Marcus was a badass fighter? Nope. Bernie, the old lady, is apparently the best sniper and the toughest soldier around. Alex Brand, she's in one comic and she's already more badass than Dom and Marcus, who gets laid out for half the whole issue. Helena Stroud shows up for one comic and immediately upstages Adam Phoenix, the guy who invented the Hammer of Dawn. And it only gets worse. By the time I got to Gears 3, I thought I was maybe a little bit safe. Maybe Gears 2 was just a fluke. Maybe it wouldn't get worse. I was so wrong. Because here's something a lot of people won't tell you. The lead writer for Gears 3 was Karen Traviss. Who is Karen Traviss? Just some radical feminist who was put in charge of writing a game about giant dudes with chainsaws. And guess what she did? She made all the male characters weaker. Marcus constantly emotional about his dad. Dom, he spends half the game grieving like we're watching a soap opera. Cole, he has a whole flashback scene where we go over his inner pain. I thought I was playing Gears of War, not The Notebook. And don't even get me started on the women, because this game is where the mask goes completely off. Suddenly Anya is a frontline soldier with no previous experience. Suddenly Sam Burney is out-quipping the guys, out-quipping Baird, the guy who's known for quipping. And then Bernie Mataki, at 70 years old, is still the most respected fighter of all time. And the worst part, the game wants you to think it's normal. Like, oh yeah, of course the women are as strong as the men, when the past 2 games were all about that not being the case. It's like they knew what they were doing, like they were slowly feeding us the woke propaganda until we just accepted it. And I remember when Gears 4 rolled around, I thought, well maybe they'll course correct, but no. Instead, they threw out everything that made the first game great and replaced it with a female lead, Of course, less muscle, more emotions, forced diversity, suddenly every squad needs to be a rainbow coalition of checkboxes, and in Gears 5, they doubled down. The marketing was all about Kate Diaz, like we were supposed to be excited about playing a female character. The story was now about her emotions, her struggle, her family, her sisterhood with other characters. Meanwhile, the guys were useless side characters. They straight up just get killed off. At first, I wanted to believe Gears was like Doom, like Space Marine, like the original Gears 1, pure, unfiltered masculinity. But no, the more I looked, the more I realized it was never truly anti-woke. The men, they cry, they struggle, they get emotional. The women, always competent, always better than the men. The writing, taking over by feminist authors by Gears 3. The Gamergate mob didn't ruin Gears. It was always a Trojan horse. It pretended to be one of the good franchises, but in reality, it was always pushing the same narratives. Gears of War was just waiting for the right moment to go full DEI. And that's why I say Gears of War 1 is the only real Gears game. The rest, a slow, calculated betrayal. Now, I won't lie, Gears of War 2006 is still mostly untouched. Marcus Phoenix, absolute legend, no nonsense, and he doesn't waste time on feelings. It was, at first glance, the kind of game that should have been impossible to corrupt. But then I took a step back. I started thinking, why was Gears of War always exclusive to Xbox? Why was Epic Games partnered with Microsoft? And then it hit me. You have to understand something. Microsoft has never been on our side. They pretend to be neutral, they pretend to be gamer-friendly, but look at what they've done. They were pushing accessibility before anyone else. They were the first to start forcing diversity quotas into their hiring practices. They own Halo, a franchise that went from pure masculine sci-fi action to Master Chief taking orders from a woman and getting lectured by an AI. In Gears of War, it was exclusive to Xbox, meaning it was always under Microsoft's watch. Let me break it down for you. Epic Games makes Gears of War. Microsoft funds it. Epic gets to pretend it's making a hardcore masculine game, while Microsoft has total control over its future. And what does Microsoft do? They let Gears 1 be the bait. They did that whole thing about upgrading the Xbox 360 just for it, to make it a whole big deal. They let one game exist as the illusion of a real anti-woke gaming experience. Then, when gamers were hooked, when we thought we had found our franchise, Microsoft let the woke agenda finally creep in. First, it's subtle. Dom crying in Gears 2, women characters being too competent, emotional vulnerability suddenly being treated as normal. And then by Gears 3, boom, the radical feminist Karen Travis takes over the writing. Suddenly, Marcus and Dom aren't just soldiers, they're men with feelings. Women like Anya and Sam aren't just in the background, they're frontline warriors. And it all makes sense when you follow the money. The BlackRock connection, the final boss of woke gaming. At first, I thought this was just Microsoft being wake, and then I followed the real trail. Microsoft is a publicly traded company, and who owns massive shares at Microsoft? BlackRock, yes, that BlackRock. The same BlackRock that pushes DEI policies in major corporations. The same BlackRock that's behind ESG. The same exact system used to force companies into compliance with progressive policies. And what do you think happens when BlackRock has influence over Microsoft? Microsoft starts pushing DEI, Microsoft funds woke gaming narratives, and Epic Games? Well, guess what? Epic sold the Gears of War franchise to Microsoft in 2014. Why? Because the Trojan horse was complete. Gears of War was never meant to stay a masculine franchise. It was always meant to lure in real gamers. Gamers who wanted something pure, and then slowly introduce progressive messaging until we accepted it. Just look at the timeline. Gears 1 was the bait, pure, seemingly safe. Gears 2, you get the subtle woke creep, stuff like Dom. Gears 3, full feminist, men cry and the women outshine them. Anya has to talk up Marcus at the very end of the game when he should be celebrating and cracking open a beer. Gears 4, the diversity quotas are in full effect, we now have a female lead. Gears 5, full compliance, the woke mob wins. And by the time Gears 5 dropped, we were so desensitized that most people didn't even question why the protagonist was suddenly a woman who had nothing to do with the previous games. They didn't question why the men were reduced to weak side characters and then killed off. They didn't question why the game's marketing pushed diversity harder than the story itself, because by then, the Trojan horse had already done its job. And now with E-Day, they're trying to come full circle. They're showing us a game that looks like Gears 1, that looks like it's going back to the full, untouched, safe, masculine game that we loved, but it's all just one big rug pull to get us with another Trojan horse. At first, I wanted to believe that Gears was like Doom, like Space Marine, like the original Gears 1, pure, unfiltered masculinity. But no, the more I looked, the more I realized. It was never truly anti-woke. The men, they cry, they struggle, and they get emotional. The women were always competent, always better than the men. The funding was controlled by Microsoft, and behind it all was BlackRock. The Gamergate woke mob didn't ruin Gears of War. It was always a Trojan horse. It pretended to be one of the good franchises, but in reality it was always pushing the same narratives. And only Gears of War 1 remains untouched. The rest was a slow, calculated betrayal. So if you're like me, if you thought Gears was our game, a safe haven against the woke agenda, just know this, you were lied to. It was always corrupt, always softening the men, always pushing the women to the top. It was never the beacon of masculinity that we thought it was. And I want you to keep that in mind when Gears E-Day is on the rise. And if you don't believe me, go through, read the books, read the comics, play the games, and pay attention to it. Trust me, you'll see what I see. But let me know what you think about everything down below, and if you're concerned that BlackRock, Sweet Baby Inc., and everything else is tied into Gears of War E-Day, which tries to pretend and sell us on an authentic masculine experience when we all know exactly where that's gonna go. Peace out. Hey! So that was an interesting video. If you're familiar with my content, you know that has basically no basis in being faithful whatsoever. And if you're not, if this is your first video and you've watched this all the way through to the end, taking any amount of time to look at the stuff I've made on YouTube should make it painfully obvious that this is kind of just a bastardization of really stupid talking points, purposely put together in such a very stupid way. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, or even if you are familiar with the channel, it should be painfully obvious that I am actually a really big fan of Gears of War. I've talked about it every single chance I get. 2 days ago, a video came out of me talking about one of these grifters talking about Gears of War and using it as a foundation for their whack job conspiracies of everything turning woke and gay and stupid. Now, if you, for some reason, watched the back half of this video and found it compelling or interesting or made you think harder, you really shouldn't. The whole point of this is just to expose how stupid and insane these kind of grifter talking points can be, because the entire back half of this video was written by Chat GPT. I made the whole thing in an hour. This mock-up video had more detail about the Gears of War games in it than their entire videos about Gears of War, which barely talked about the games. They don't talk about the games on merit. They don't talk about the games as video games. They just say, women, people of color, a lady with a bald head equals woke, equals gay, equals a bad video game. And it has nothing to do with the game in itself, because these people don't play Gears of War. They don't play half of the games that they talk about. And it really pisses me off in a very specific way, because I am such a big fan of Gears. And this last weekend, 2 days ago, with that video with Dr. Disaster, this guy who has 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, good for him, but that's not the kind of guy who makes a video that is complete bullshit made out of schizophrenic, gangstalker, paranoid talking points, and in 24 hours of making a video about E-Day gets inside sources that tell him that the entirety of the coalition, the company that is making Gears of War E-Day, is a sorority of people who hate Gears of War, when the creative director on E-Day is a dude who's been attached to Gears of War since Gears of War 2. There is no logic here, or anything of valid input to be added. There is no discussion, there is no nuance. Either things are woke and gay and women and feminized, or they're good. but even when they're good, there's something off about them. The whole thing about the E-Day trailer and everyone's reactions to it, including some of my own, is that, oh, they're going back to form. They're avoiding the kind of generalization of the sci-fi and of the stories in Gears 4 and 5, and they're going back to the kind of grittier horror stylings of Gears 1, 2, and 3. But even when we get this, even when they go out of their way to show us E-Day way ahead of time, and it's being worked on by the people at People Can Fly, who have worked on Gears before, who's worked on Bulletstorm, which is also a great game in the same vein as Gears, they're going to come out and say, oh, it's gay and it's woke. Why? Because in 2021, when People Can Fly made Outriders, a game that is woke because the main character is a bald lady, even though the game has a character creator, but because that game 4 years ago happened to have Sweet Baby Inc. on as an advisor to the game, now anything People Can Fly do is gay and woke forever. And let's ignore the fact that People Can Fly are coming on to support the coalition, and some of the people at People Can Fly are just developers who worked on Gears 5 and were likely working on Gears 6 and or Gears E-Day before just moving over to People Can Fly. That's likely why the studio is coming on to help, because there is so much intermingling between People Can Fly, the Coalition, and a lot of other devs from Epic Games back in the day when Gears of War was still being made by Epic. There's this whole ecosystem of people who kind of just jump between these three companies. Obviously, they're going to come and work together on a project like that. And the whole point of me making this little extra rant and making that stupid thing in the first half of this video is just to say, think about things, because if someone is telling you something and it sounds so plausible, think about it a little bit harder. That same guy, Dr. Disaster, was trying to tell us that the majority of Switch players, Nintendo Switch players, are majority male based on this graphic, which comes from a survey of 60,000 people in 2017. Not only is it, 5 years out of date, which is like the standard for academic papers, which obviously this is not an academic setting, but regardless, it's an 8-year-old survey of 60,000 people. The Switch has sold over 130 million units. I shouldn't have to pull out the math to tell you exactly how flawed this logic and everything else attached to it is. And I know, I'm not going to change the minds of any grifters that are using Gears of War as a foundation, as a base for their weird paranoid conspiracies. Their whole thing of everything's woke and it's gay and they're out to get you and they hate you, the straight white dude. And I explicitly make this message because look at me. This face, this facial hair, this whole everything I got going on, the sound of my voice, I look and sound like I should be right in with these people, but guess what? But I'm not, because I have the fortitude to look at something and judge it objectively off its merits. These people claim meritocracy. If the game's good, it doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter if the game's good or not, because a game can be objectively amazing, like Baldur's Gate 3, which, everybody unanimously loves. Even if you're not into that kind of game, most people still just respect it for what it is. And they'll still look at a game like that and go, gay, woke, bad. The laziest, most inane coverage you could ever do of a subject that is completely devoid of nuance, of logical thought, or reason of any kind. For somebody that is a big fan of Gears of War, who loves Gears of War, I have so much Gears shit everywhere, because I've loved this series and I grew up on it. And I would love to have the complex, nuanced discussions of Kate Diaz. Is she a bad character? Well, there's this and this and this in the story, and we can get into it and the whole motivations of her character and how that's portrayed on screen. How much of it is the director's fault, or how much of it is Laura Bailey's fault, or how much of it is, whoever's. If somebody's at fault, who is it, and what is the causes of that, and what makes the character bad from a writing perspective. But that's not what we have. We have a bunch of people who don't play these video games. They may have played Gears of War 2 back on the 360 in 2008. A lot of people did. They were big video games. But these are not people who love Gears of War. These are people who need something to fuel their culture war fire so they can shit out a 10-minute video every single day of the week saying, hey, look, these guys, they're gay and bad. Why? Well, This cover art of a game I've never played has a woman on it, so therefore the story is about sisterhood, even though the one woman character on the cover art is the singular female character in the entire game, which you would know if you had played the game, but obviously they don't fucking play these games. But again, I'm never going to convince a grifter that they're in the wrong. If somebody who is as big and influential as the Act Man can't whip some of these guys into shape, I'm sure as shit not. The whole point of this is just to say, hey, you, personal viewer, who may or may not have found some semblance of honesty in the first half of this video, or who sees those other videos and kind of takes them with a little bit of complacency. Think about it for more than 2 seconds. How generalized is this critique? Does the critique have anything to do with the actual game itself? Or are they asking you to hate a game exclusively based on a JPEG that is the cover art for the game? And there's a lot of discussion to be had with other Gears creators like Shadows. I've talked about him on stream a couple times. This is the biggest Gears of War creator in the world, and the last month he's been posting basically just old trailers and stuff and a full gameplay walkthrough of Gears of War 1 on his channel. And to me, that's really indicative of Gears of War content on YouTube or online in general. It's literally just reruns at this point. And there's a discussion to be had there of how interesting is Gears of War, and how come it hasn't broken into more mainstream audiences, especially in an age where games like Warhammer are all the fucking rage. It's bigger than ever. But Gears of War just doesn't catch on, and asking why and where the faults in those series are would be a really interesting point of discussion to bring up and have with a collective audience who wants a way into a series like this, but just really can't find a foothold for it. And it's especially hard to do that when you have some crazed gangstock nutjob sitting over here dancing around with his PNG avatar saying that these games are gay and woke and bad exclusively based on some cover art and some random dots that they put together and some inside sources that aren't just a Chat GPT prompt. Point being, this content is lazy and derivative and really simple on purpose. It's supposed to spark an emotion within you. And for some people, it's really good at bringing out that emotion and drawing on your fears or anything else you have. But you can't let that be everything there is, because you cannot sit here and say, we care about logic, we care about a meritocracy, we care about things being good for the sake of being good, like they were in the good old days, when these games have been what they stereotype as woke since 2006, 2008. And while they may not be as quote-unquote woke and trash and feminist garbage as the modern games are, or as they are projecting the modern games to be, which we haven't even seen gameplay of yet, they're writing it off already because they need fuel for a culture war that is so pointless, because there's so many things going on in our world right now, and worrying about whether or not Gears E-Day is going to be a feminist cessfire doesn't matter. I care about the game if it's good, which I can't elaborate on that because we don't know what the game looks like. We haven't seen any gameplay. We don't even know when it's coming out. All we know is that there's a game. It's a prequel. It takes place on E-Day. The main characters are Marcus and Dom. I don't know about you, that doesn't really scream super hyper feminist to me. But what can I say? And that's basically this. Bit of a rant, I know, but God, these grifters using one of the things I grew up on and that I loved for so long and that I still do love, and I'm really excited for E-Day. It really just pisses me off, and I just wanted to share that. If you want to see more commentary like this, go back, watch those old Gears of War videos. They'll be linked, up in the corner or at the end of the video or in the description or something along those lines. And if you want to come and say hi, I'm streaming every Saturday at 9 p.m. Central here on YouTube or over on Twitch, doing this same kind of thing as in that, breakdown from 2 days ago. But without further ado, I'm going to wrap it up here and stop ranting at you so you can, go back to your normal day and hopefully rinse out your ears with bleach, I guess. Stay cool, have fun, be awesome. I'll see you later. Buster.